There's something inside you that works against you 24 hours a day. It doesn't rest, it doesn't take vacations, and it's operating right now while you watch this.
There's something inside you that works against you 24 hours a day. It doesn't rest, it doesn't take vacations, and it's operating right now while you watch this. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called it the psychological shadow. And here's the terrifying paradox. The more you ignore it, the more power it gains over your life. You felt it, even if you've never named it. That relationship you swore would be different, and somehow ended exactly like the others. That money that comes in and disappears, like there's a silent drain you can't find. That exhaustion that isn't from work, but from carrying a weight you can't explain. And that quiet voice that whispers you're not enough. You don't deserve it. And sooner or later, people will realize you're a fraud. These look like separate problems, but very often, they're branches of the same hidden root. Today, you're going to understand why your most persistent problems keep staying unsolved, and what changes when you stop fighting the shadow like an enemy and start using it like a source of power. But I need to warn you up front. This video might bother you, not because it's complicated, but because it's personal, and it tends to pull the shadow out of people who would rather keep it asleep. If you want a brutally practical way to recognize shadow, start watching comment sections. Seriously. After you understand this concept, comments become a mirror. You'll notice how some people click off early, some get angry, some feel uneasy, some even tear up without knowing why. That reaction isn't random. That's the shadow protecting itself, because the shadow lives in the dark. It's been hidden in the basement for years, and you're about to turn the lights on. Here's what you need to know before we go deeper. This is an inner alchemical process. It's the kind of work where you transform lead into gold, because the shadow, contrary to what you've been taught, can be the richest gold mine you have. Imagine there's a buried chest inside you filled with your most authentic strength, your sharpest talents, and your most powerful potential. And you've spent your whole life throwing dirt on top of it. Worse, you've spent your whole life pretending the chest doesn't exist, because someone taught you that what's inside is ugly, wrong, shameful. But you were lied to. What's in your shadow isn't only darkness. It's also everything you never allowed yourself to become. By the end of this, you'll understand what the shadow is, how it was built in you since childhood, how it feeds every day without you noticing, and most importantly, how to integrate it and turn it into strength. Because as long as you fight your shadow, it wins. The game only changes when you learn how to move with it and stop treating it like a monster under the bed. So what is this psychological shadow really? You've probably heard the word online, in a book, in some Instagram post, in a clip someone shared. But most people never get a real explanation. And because of that, the shadow keeps running parts of their life in the background, quietly destroying what matters. Jung described the shadow as the collection of qualities we dislike and try to hide from ourselves. That sounds simple, but it opens a trapdoor. The shadow is everything you repressed over the years. Everything you pushed down because it hurt too much to look at, because it felt too humiliating to admit, or because someone convinced you it was unacceptable. We're talking about pain you buried without processing. Emotions you swallowed because expressing them wasn't safe or wasn't allowed. Anger you never released. Fear you carry but don't fully understand. Desires you label forbiddens. Shame, humiliation, rejection, and all the moments you learned silently that being yourself had a cost. But here's what most people miss, and it changes everything. Your shadow isn't only bad traits. Your shadow also holds your undeveloped potential. Talents you abandoned, strengths you never used, versions of you that died before they were even born. The kid who wanted to be an artist but heard that won't pay the bills. The teenager who wanted to lead but learned to stay small because someone else already had the spotlight. The part of you that wanted to shine but felt embarrassed to be seen. Those parts don't disappear. They get stored. And the less integrated the shadow is, the denser it becomes. The more you pretend it's not there, the more it grows. The more you deny it, the more influence it has, because the shadow isn't a drawer you close and forget. It behaves like living pressure. It wants one thing, to rise. When that energy rises, you can waste it as chaos, or you can use it as fuel for integration. That's the point. Shadow work is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. There's a line that captures this in a way people don't expect. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's you. It's the part of you that got exiled and is trying to come home. And here's the problem. It doesn't communicate politely. If you lock it in the basement, it often communicates through destruction. It breaks relationships. It pushes impulsive spending. It ruins friendships. It triggers emotional explosions. It makes you self-sabotage at work. Not because it wants to destroy you, but because it wants you to finally look. Let me tell you a story that makes this real. A woman, I'll call her Diana, was about 5 or 6 when her father left home without explanation and never came back. A child that young doesn't have the tools to process that kind of shock, so she does the only thing she can. She buries it. The pain, the panic, the insecurity, the unanswered question, why did you leave me? What did I do wrong? She pushes it down and keeps living. Diana grows up, studies, works. She's smart, dedicated, responsible. But for decades, her income never rises past a certain invisible ceiling. She changes jobs, tries new projects, learns new strategies, and still hits the same limit like there's a glass wall. It's as if an unseen hand pushes her down every time she tries to climb. Then, one year her company gives a collective end-of-year bonus. It's triple what she's used to. She looks at the number and something shocking happens. She doesn't celebrate. She cries all night. Not tears of joy, tears of panic. And in the middle of that crying she can't explain, she has a breakthrough. For the first time, she can see her own shadow. Because why would someone feel fear after receiving a big bonus? What she sees is the 5-year-old still trapped inside her, still terrified, still holding the reins, deciding how much the adult is allowed to earn. And the logic is brutal, but simple. If I gain, I can lose, and losing hurts too much. The last time I had something good, it disappeared and never came back. So it's safer not to have. Because what I don't have, no one can take from me. That's it. A decision made by a terrified child decades ago, still commanding the life of an adult woman. Those tears weren't weakness. They were the shadow breaking the basement door after years of being locked in. It was the inner child saying, "Are you finally going to look at me? Or are you going to keep pretending I don't exist?" And when Diana finally looked, things began to change. Now bring that back to your life. Somewhere inside you, there may be an old decision still controlling your current results, installed when you were too young to question it. As long as you don't look, it stays in charge. So how does the shadow get built inside you? You weren't born with it. It was built brick by brick when you were too young to understand what was happening. A stressed parent says something confusing. A rule gets enforced with no explanation. A look of disapproval lands on you like a verdict. Silence punishes you harder than yelling. Expectations hang in the air, and you learn you must meet them, even if you don't know why. This doesn't happen once. It happens hundreds of times, thousands of times. A child can't say, "This reflects my parents' emotional limits, not my worth." A child just feels. And when it hurts too much, the child buries it. That's how the shadow forms. And the shadow doesn't just sit down there quietly. It feeds. Do you know what it feeds on? You. Every time you repress an emotion, it takes energy to keep it buried. And that energy comes from your body, from your vitality, from your life force. That's why you can sleep well, eat well, do nothing intense, and still feel exhausted. It's not laziness. A huge amount of your energy is being used to keep the basement door shut. You're tired because you're constantly fighting yourself. The shadow has two favorite tools to stay hidden. The first is projection. Projection is when you see in other people what you refuse to see in yourself. That person who irritates you instantly, who doesn't even have to do much to get under your skin, might be holding up a mirror. What triggers you in them often points to something in you, something you've denied, suppressed, or disowned. The second tool is rationalization, which is basically the art of creating elegant excuses so you don't have to face the truth. I'm not angry, I'm just direct. It's not fear, it's being cautious. I'm not self-sabotaging. The universe just doesn't cooperate. The mind is brilliant at generating explanations when the real goal is simple. Don't go into the basement. Here's the key that changes everything. The shadow is not your enemy. Marie-Louise von Franz described it in a grounded way. The shadow becomes hostile mainly when it's ignored or misunderstood. In other words, it attacks you when you pretend it doesn't exist. It sabotages you when you treat it like a monster instead of a part of you that wants integration. The tricky part is that shadow behavior doesn't come with a notification. It doesn't announce itself. It acts in the dark, but it leaves tracks. If you learn to read those tracks, you start reclaiming control. There are 5 tracks that show up again and again. The first is disproportionate emotional reactions. Someone makes a small comment and you explode, or you shut down and replay it for days. Deep down, you know the reaction didn't match the moment, but it happened anyway. Ken Wilber explains it simply. When something hits you with intense emotional charge, there's usually shadow material underneath. If it's only information, it doesn't shake your system. The second track is slips, the moments where something escapes when your guard drops. You say a sentence you immediately regret. You make a joke that leaves the room tense. You reveal something you didn't plan to reveal. Sigmund Freud talked about these slips as leaks from the unconscious. You can think of it as pressure escaping through a crack. The third track is repetitive patterns. New relationship, same story. New job, same toxic dynamic. You leave one frustrating environment and somehow walk into another version of it. With money, you earn more and spend more, or earn less, and still stay stuck under the same ceiling. The numbers change, but the inner limit stays. That's not the universe targeting you. That's a pattern repeating until you finally look. The fourth track is projection in a more obvious form. Someone you criticize constantly. Someone you can't stand. Someone you can't even look at without feeling heat. When you isolate what exactly they do that triggers you, you often find a clue about what you disowned in yourself. The anger isn't only about them. It's about what they reflect. The fifth track is disturbing dreams. Night is where the shadow likes to speak, because when you sleep, the conscious mind relaxes and the unconscious gets more space. Filters drop, censorship weakens, and the shadow has room to send images that your daytime mind avoids. And you've probably noticed how certain dreams leave you with a strange discomfort, like your own psyche is watching you. Now, shadow shows up everywhere, but there's one area where it tends to be especially cruel, especially quiet, and especially powerful: money. It's that fear of losing everything, even when you don't even have that much. It's that feeling that if you gain, someone will take it, or you'll ruin it. It's that inner voice that says you don't deserve more. That money is for other people, more capable people, more worthy people. It's that strange guilt about wanting abundance, as if desire itself were selfish or ugly. It's the gain and lose cycle, like you have an internal thermostat that won't let you pass a certain point. That's shadow, operating in the dark, steering financial decisions without asking your permission. Before you leave, sit with this for a second. If your shadow has been running parts of your life in the dark, Where is it showing up the loudest right now? Is it in your relationships? In that repeating pattern you keep swearing will be different next time? Or is it in money? That invisible ceiling you can't seem to break no matter what you try? Who's actually steering your decisions when you're tired, anxious, rejected, or under pressure? The adult you, or an older part that's still trying to stay safe? And if the shadow isn't your enemy, but a part of you that wants to come home, what would change this week if you stopped fighting it and started listening to what it's been trying to say all along?